Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Danny and it's time for another Chonky Check In. This is one of my favorite series to do on my channel. This is where I talk to you about big books. And big books for me, it's 500 pages or more, so all of these books qualify. And I usually wait until I have about 10 books to talk to you guys about. However, I waited a little too long this time, and today I have 15. There is one book I can't talk to you about my feelings because of the fact that it is for another round of Battle of the Booktubers, but I will just mention it here to let you know that I have read it. And this is my way of pushing my chonky reads on you guys to maybe help you read some bigger books if you're interested. If you're not, if you're just here for the chaos, then welcome. I will put timestamps down below on all of the books that will be featured in this video, so if you guys are only interested in a few books, you can skip around to whichever your heart desires. I am going to start with A Gathering of Magic, which is book number 2 in the Darker Shades of Magic series. And if the cover looks different, this is because this is a collector's edition that I got. This was 512 pages and I rated it a 4.5 star. I do think that this is my favorite in the trilogy. You're going to see in just a minute that I did also finish the third book in the trilogy, and I liked all of them. All of them were above a 4 star. I think the first one was a 4. It was either a 4 or a 4.25. I think it might have been a 4.25. And this is a 4.5, and then the last book is a 4.25 as well, I think. Yeah. So this was my favorite. I do think that I enjoyed this because of multiple avenues. I like the fact that our characters in this are separate, and so we are getting to see different versions of the world from our characters' perspectives while they're separated. And the reason it's important that they're separated is because when they are together, there is one particular thing about one of the characters that makes them privileged, and it colors the world around them in a different light. And so I enjoyed exploring the world without that coloring of privilege from that particular character. This book also introduced probably my favorite character of the series, which is Alucard, who is a captain of a privateering ship. And I really enjoyed his character arc, his backstory that we eventually learn, and his type of magic. I think through him and through the contest, the magical contest in this book, you learn a lot more about the different magics that are possible in this world, which I also loved. I love developing magic systems. I love learning the rules and how things work and who uses what magic for what reason. That's always something that I really enjoy. So next is A Conjuring of Light, which is the third book in that series. This is 624 pages and I rated this a 4.25. And I will say, so the second book ends on a huge cliffhanger. And I was super excited to see where that led to in the third book. And I am satisfied with where it went. I just think, I don't know. I don't know what I liked less about this book. I think it was a little bit more drawn out. Obviously it's 100 more pages than the second book, but I think that this book was a lot more emotional than the other two. Because of the fact that you have things tying up, you have relationships coming to their head, and you find out more about the characters in this because of the fact that we've lived with the characters for so long. And I did enjoy that. I think that all of that with everything else that was going on in the world made it a little bit chaotic for me. And I still really enjoyed it. Obviously a 4.25. I didn't get the like crazy race to the finish feeling that I got in the second book. So that's probably why this one ended up with a lower rating. I think as far as my thoughts on the entire series, the second book is my favorite, the third book would be my next favorite, and then the first book would be my least favorite. So I do think that this series finishes out very well. Next is Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. This is 638 pages and I rated this a 3.5 star. If you haven't ever heard of Elantris, this is Brandon Sanderson's debut work, and you follow, it's been a minute since I've read this, but you follow a character who lives next to the city of Elantris. And Elantris is a city that used to be revered and used to be thought of as like the city of the gods, but has recently become a curse and kind of a blight upon society. And one of our characters, who is a very privileged prince, comes down with the curse that ends up getting you put into Elantris. And he has to learn about how it's like, or what it's like to live in the city of Elantris, which I did find very fascinating. The magic system, the fact that people within Elantris, anytime they have an ache or a pain or an injury of some sort, it just stays because their body no longer heals itself, was very intriguing to learn how the people of Elantris have, you know, either learned to live with it or have kind of gone a little crazy with their pains. And even like at the very beginning, he stubs his toe, and that little small injury aches him throughout the entire book. And it's just, it was very, I did like that aspect. The other character that you follow in this is his betrothed. And so it is a woman who, or a princess from another land, from a kingdom that they are trying. There's also like war escapades going on in the background, and her kingdom and this kingdom are trying to form an alliance, and she ends up traveling. She finds out that her betrothed is dead whenever she arrives in the city, and so she has to learn about the politics and everything going on in the kingdom without having her husband by her side. And I really liked her character as well. She's very strong-willed, and she definitely has to learn about her, the fact that she can't do everything like she used to do. She has to be a little bit more careful in the place that she's at now, and she doesn't think that she should have to. And so I did like living with her character as well. My reason for the 3.5 rating in this is I do think that this book was a little clunky, and it definitely was more drawn out than I think it needed to be. I think that it could have been shortened quite a bit, and it still would have gotten its main point across. I do like the magic system, and I liked the conflict that happened within the book. I feel like I could have dealt with less of that and more character development. It definitely felt like we were being stretched in too many different directions, and I think it could have been trimmed a little bit and been really amazing. Next is Kings of the Wyld, and I rated this 5 stars. This was 502 pages. So it just barely makes it in the Chonky Check Ins. This is also a debut novel from this author, and the third book to this series. I have the second book. The third book in the series, I believe, comes out at the end of this year, so I'm excited to continue. If you haven't heard about Kings of the Wyld, you follow a mercenary band that goes and hunts monsters, or they used to in their prime. So this book follows them 20 years past when they were known as the legendary band of Saga. They went on some incredible adventures when they were younger, and now all of them have kind of parted ways, and they're in different parts of the kingdom doing different things, having different levels of success. But one of them comes to the others and says, we have to get the band back together because we need to go and rescue my daughter. So they go on one last adventure, one last quest with each other. And it's just a really funny and amazing story about men and like brotherhood. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I do know that humor is very subjective, and so depending on your mood, and even depending on the day that I had chosen to read this, I definitely think I could have had a different reaction. I really enjoyed the humor on the day that I read it. I thought it was very amusing. It's definitely guy humor in the middle of fights. There would be some really weird things that would happen, and the way that they would comment on it or react to it was just really fun. And yeah, this book also has a lot of side characters and side bands, which is all the sequels are different bands within the book. And so I am excited to continue on with some of the characters that we learn about in this series. Next is Iron Flame. So this is 640 pages, and I rated this a 3.75. Ooh, this is very shiny. I'm gonna have to make sure I hold this in a certain angle. So 3.75 was my rating. I think that this book, the ending, is what both saved and also irritated me. I think that I don't care about the relationship between Violet and Xaden. I don't care. I would much rather spend more time with the dragons and more time with the world. And you do some of that, but there's definitely some bickering that goes on in this that I just didn't care to read about. The ending, I do think, this does end on a cliffhanger, does make me want to read the third, but I also feel like it was kind of, it felt emotionally manipulative to me, and I get a little irritated by that, because I definitely, I understand that cliffhangers are meant to make you want to read the next book, and I have loved some cliffhangers that I've talked about in this video, but I don't know, this one just felt a little wrong to me, a little manipulative. So I think I've decided that I'm not going to purchase the third, and that I'll probably just read it from my local library. But yeah, so this series is okay. I think the focus is definitely more on the romance and more on the relationship dynamics than I want it to be. And so 3.75 is not a bad rating whatsoever. I did enjoy a lot of this book, but I did feel there were definitely points in time while I was reading it that I was like, oh my gosh, can we just move past this and go to the more important topics? But anyway, so that's my thoughts on Iron Flame. Next is Cursor's Fury, which is 676 pages, and I rated this 4.5 stars. This is the third or fourth book in the Codex Alera series by Jim Butcher. And I've really enjoyed the series so far. I'm excited to continue. My hope is that I continue Captain's, is it called Captain's Fury? Captain's something is the next book. And so I'll be reading that hopefully within the next month. In a series, you follow our main character named Tavi, who starts the series at 15. And he is unusual because he doesn't have what's called Fury crafting. Furies are different types of elementals that the society as a whole have learned to use this magic to help their lives be a little bit easier. And he is, I think, a shepherd in the very beginning of the book, and he just has a hard time with other kids around him as well as adults because of the fact that he doesn't have any Fury crafting. And he gets interwoven into this political landscape where you have a ton of different characters who are all either on one side or the other, or I guess there's multiple sides eventually, of this massive war that's happening within these kingdoms and this espionage that's happening as well. One of the other characters you follow, I can't remember her name, but she starts out the very first book as someone who is betrayed by her master or her mentor. And she figures out then that there are people within this kingdom that are ingrained so much and so high up in a kingdom to try and figure out things and bring back messages to the kingdom that they're actually working for. And you also have there's other races that are past enemies as well that come into play throughout the story. It's a massive, it's an epic journey for all of these characters and this political landscape that you kind of have to navigate. And I've really enjoyed it. The characters are what make the story, the relationships. I know I just talked about not liking the relationship in Iron Flame, but the character development within this series and getting to see these characters grow together and the relationships they make, the skills that they gain along the way and how it helps them within this political landscape are really, it was really fun to see. I was kind of hoping that this one, Cursor's Fury, would be a 5-star because they've just gotten better and better as they've gone on. But I do think I liked the second book better than the third. So I'm hoping the fourth book will surprise me and we'll continue to go up with our ratings, but we'll see. Next is Night Film, and I've talked about this book quite a bit recently on my channel. This is 600 pages and I rated this a 4.75. I also just have to talk real quick. Let me get a book that's similar. Or not similar, but okay. So I just talked about Kings of the Wyld, Night Film. This is 502 pages. This is 600. That's crazy how different that is, but this book is so much heavier than this. And anyway, I just find that fascinating. Night Film is one of 2 horror books on this list. So good on Night Film for being a long and chunky read. This book follows an investigative journalist as he investigates the death of an infamous horror director's daughter that was deemed a suicide, but there are some suspicious circumstances surrounding her death, and so he goes in to investigate. The horror director, so the girl's daughter, or the girl's father, has like a cult following, and there are some like black net things that are going on. This is a mixed media read, and so you will see throughout the book blog posts and just newspaper clippings. Sometimes you see text messages, and I really enjoyed the little elements of the investigation as you're following him. There also is a couple of side characters in this that kind of lighten the mood. They're the comic relief, essentially. They do have a bigger part to play in the world, but I liked the grumpy investigative journalist vibe with the two sidekicks that he ends up having but not wanting. But this is a really fun read. Very, very scary and mind-bending. The ending was fantastic. I don't know if everyone's going to absolutely love the way that this ends. I really enjoyed it, but if you're interested in horror, this is really a horror / thriller, and you like maybe a little bit of like some nods to cult classics, I think this will probably be something you would enjoy. Next, we have The Lies of Locke Lamora, which I rated 5 stars, and this is 752 pages-ish. It's a longer book. I reread this, so this is the only reread that's on this list, and it took me forever to reread this book. I think it took me 6 months. I did read this on Kindle, which means it was like my bedtime book, so I'd read it like maybe 5-10 minutes every evening, which is why it took me so long. If you haven't heard of The Lies of Locke Lamora, you follow a group of young boys who are each taken from circumstances when they are very young and trained to be thieves, and they are called the Gentlemen Bastards. So this is the Gentlemen Bastards series, and you get to see them grow up. You get to see there's a lot that goes on. So you get to start with them very young and see their growth into adulthood. And you also have a dual timeline where you're getting some of their story as children and then some of their story as adults. And in their adult lives, they definitely run into some really precarious situations that they have to help each other out of. So found family tropes galore in this. I absolutely love the characters. I love the grungy world. They live kind of in a Venetian-like setting, and the different islands that are along this chain that they live with have different castes for them, and there has been like turmoil within all of these islands for power. So there is a political system, like a duke of the entire area, but there are also gangs that run a lot of the area as well. And so there is talk of them essentially having like an agreement that they both can rule as long as they don't step on each other's toes, and that affects the people that live in these cities. And so yeah, there's a lot going on. I really want to continue with the series sooner rather than later, so I don't forget all the details from the first book, because it is rather chunky, but I'm definitely excited to be back in the world. Next is Engines of Chaos. This is 560 pages, and I rated this a 4.25 star. I recently talked about this in my Read Until I Get a 5-Star Part 1 vlog. This was the one that I was going in thinking that it was going to be a 5-star, and ended up not being. I do still really enjoy the series, but the first one I definitely think is more my speed than this one. In this series, this is the second in a series, so I'm not going to tell you about this plot, but in this series, you do follow a noble family. I think there's 5 different POVs in the first book, and all of them are related in some way to this noble family. They are spread out, interspersed throughout this kingdom, and so you get to see the kingdom dynamics, how the kingdom works, how all of the different cities within this kingdom are important to the structural integrity of the empire. You also have some rumblings in the background of war with kingdoms that are next to them. You have a magic system at play, and depending on where you are in the kingdom is going to depend on how much information is known about it, how much that is used. Actually, there's multiple magic systems at play. There's one character specifically in the series, her name is Tyretta, that I really enjoyed, especially in the first book, because of where she ends up in the middle of the forest and in some areas that she as a noble is not used to living in. And anyway, I am really excited to continue the series whenever the third one comes out. I think it may be coming out next year, but I'm not sure. Next is Malice. I also recently talked about this book in my highs and lows for May and June. This is a 4.5 star rating, and it is 670-ish pages, 672 pages. Sorry, I'm looking down at my notes. I really enjoyed this, and I can't wait to continue with Valor. And by the way, this is just, also, this is a new addition to my library. I actually just purchased this, so I am really excited to have this. I also have the second book. It's not currently in my library because it's sitting on my couch, but I am really excited to continue the series. If you haven't heard of the Faithful and the Fallen series, you follow a lot of different characters, but I'll just talk about two. You follow Corbin, who is a young boy who lives in a village in a kingdom, and he lives in a time frame where they have like a test for becoming a man, and he's getting close to that age, and so he's been trained or being trained at this point in time, and something specific happens to him where you know that there's definitely something more in his future. You just don't know what. And there are also some things that are happening, some rumblings within the kingdom that are omens for things to come. And so he gets wrapped up into larger kingdom dynamics. You also follow the prince of the large king. So there's a whole bunch of little kings, and then you have like the emperor, but he still calls himself a king, who's in charge of all of them. And his son is forming a war band and preparing for these ominous things that are happening. And so those are the two characters that you follow. There are so many more characters and so much more going on in this. There's also an animal companion with Corbin that I really enjoyed learning about and seeing his interactions with that particular companion and how they affect the rest of the story. But I really enjoyed the series, and I can't wait to continue. The next book is a little cheaty because it's not quite 500 pages, but I just had to mention it. That is This Charming Man. This is, I think, 498 pages. So technically, it doesn't meet my qualifications. I'm putting a little asterisk next to this one, but I just had to mention it. This was a 4.5 star read for me. I really enjoy the Stranger Times series. So this series it follows a newspaper organization that investigates supernatural crimes. And at the beginning of the first book, you're not sure if they're real or if it's just fake tabloid, gossipy news that they're putting out. And so getting to see this team of individuals, also the audiobooks are absolutely fantastic. The bickering of the characters, the grumpy editor, the kind of chaotic nature of the Stranger Times itself, and the mysteries going on with these things that they're trying to solve and investigate is just a lot of fun. And I will say, I think I liked the second book better than the first. I really liked the mystery. I really liked the fact that this series has a through line mystery. So like throughout all of the series, well, I think all the series, I've only read 2 of them, but I'm assuming that it's going to continue. You have like a main storyline that you are following, and you're getting bits and pieces throughout these other little mysteries that they're investigating as the newspaper organization. And this one, This Charming Man, follows vampires or potential vampires. And so I don't know, I thought it was a lot of fun, and getting to kind of be back with our characters and seeing the growth of their relationships is really fun. This book also, I think, features one of my favorite character is Bancroft, which is the editor, the cranky editor, and you get to find out a little bit more about his character and dive a little bit deeper into his mind in this. And I really enjoyed it. I also have several books on this list from the Battle of the Booktubers. The first, which I cannot mention, but I'll just say that I read it here, is The Poppy War. The next one is Our Share of the Night, which that vlog is already out, so I will link it in the cards and down in the description if you guys are interested in my full-fledged thoughts on Our Share of the Night. It is 588 pages, and I rated it 2.75 stars. This is the second horror on this list, and I think that this one just didn't work for me because it is a little bit of a cult book. and I have found that that is something I don't really enjoy. So, which is weird because there are certain things like Night Film has cult stuff in it, but it's not following a cult. I guess maybe that's the difference. I find that I get a little bored with the cult narrative, and it's kind of easy to predict the intentions of certain characters within cult books. I also think that some of the trigger warnings in this book I could have dealt without. There is child abuse and multiple other things, but that is the main thing that really bothered me because I think that the book could have been done without it, maybe. And so, yeah, you follow a father and son in this story. The timeline is very odd. You do jump back and forth between characters and different times throughout the story. There are different parts, but at the very beginning you follow a father and son who are traveling across country looking to escape something and also go towards something else. There is a magical ability that the father has that the father is thinking the son also has, and so you understand that they are trying to outrun whatever it is that is using this magical ability of theirs. The father also is in dire straits the entire time because he has a heart condition that is essentially he should have died when he was very young, and he has lived to an age that no one expected him to, and so you have that component throughout the story as well. Next is Warbreaker, which is 688 pages. I rated this 4 stars, and I also recently talked about this on my Battle of the Booktubers vlog, the round 1 vlog. And this is another Brandon Sanderson. You follow 2 sisters in a kingdom where the oldest sister has been promised to another kingdom that they have been at war at for a really long time. And at the last minute, the father decides to send the younger sister instead because she is essentially less trained and not as important as the older daughter. That part really made me mad about this book. It made me not mad at Brandon Sanderson for writing it that way. It made me mad at the character. So that was good writing on Sanderson's part for making me have this like visceral reaction to this father sacrificing his youngest daughter because he doesn't want to give his oldest daughter up. It was very, very upsetting. But anyway, so the youngest daughter gets sent to marry this god king, essentially, in this other kingdom. And the oldest daughter goes on a quest to try and save her little sister. And you get to follow their perspectives separately throughout the book to see how, like, what's happening within this other kingdom. And the magic system is really interesting. It has to do with light bending and colors, and yeah. I don't know how much else I want to give you, but I think the reason that this didn't get a higher rating from me was because of some of the character decisions, the character arc specifically of the older sister. I thought that I was really going to enjoy where she went, but I found throughout the story she was very irritating, and I definitely didn't enjoy some of the decisions that she was making. And I think that was the point. I think that it was supposed to be eye-opening for her, but then I also think that she didn't really learn some of the things that she should have learned according to some of the actions that she takes. I also didn't really enjoy the romance that was budding throughout the entire story. It's definitely a slow burn, but I just didn't care. At the end of the day, had they not ended up together, I would have been perfectly fine if they just ended up as friends. Anyway, I'm glad that I read it, and I am also glad of all of the Easter eggs that are in this book. I did not realize that Warbreaker had so many Stormlight Easter eggs, so that was really fun. And the last book on this list is Ashes of the Sun, which is 592 pages, and I rated this a 3.75 star. In this book, you follow 2 characters. At the very beginning, they are very young children, and they get separated. The daughter is taken to be part of the Order, really against her will and against her family's will, kind of. And she gets taken to become what's called a Centaur, which are the like righteous upholders of the land. They get to use magic, and they're more powerful than anyone around them. And then you have the brother who gets left behind at that instance, and he, because of the fact that they are separated at a very young age, they are raised in 2 different environments. So the sister is raised in the Order, thinking that the Order is what's best. The brother is raised in a way where the Order is kind of the oppressors, and he they grow up on two different sides of the kingdom, and the kingdom is in turmoil. There are people who are trying to overthrow the kingdom. There's darker forces at play as well, and they're on two different sides, and they do eventually meet, their storylines meet, and you get to kind of see what they do with having, you know, the fact that they're family, but they've been raised in two different ways. I did like that aspect. I liked seeing both sides of the spectrum and seeing that neither one of them is really right, and seeing that both of their hearts are kind of in the right place, but maybe a little misguided in certain aspects. What I struggled with this book is connecting to the characters, and I don't know if it was because they were younger, or I don't know if it was the writing that I just wasn't connecting with, but it just felt very flat to me as far as the characters' decisions, and when bad things would happen, when people would die. I just was kind of along for the ride. I felt like a fly on the wall instead of being in it and immersed in the story. And so that's why I ended up with a 3.75 instead of higher. I'm hoping that now that I've read through the first story, and if I continue with the second book, that I'll be a little bit more invested in the characters, but we'll see. So those are the 15 chunky books that I have read recently. I will put an average star rating up on the screen for you guys. I didn't calculate that before filming this, but I am really happy with a lot of the chunky reads that I've been picking up. I do still think that I am in my chunky era. I like to be fully immersed in a world and be in it for a while. And so I've liked the journey that I've taken. It's taken me a little bit to get here. This year, I definitely have been focused on some smaller reads, but when I get to the big chunky world building books, I love my time there. If you guys have read any chunky reads that you've just absolutely loved recently, let me know down in the comments down below. I would love to chat with you guys about what you've been loving reading recently. If you don't feel like chatting, let's leave a crown for the Kings of the Wyld. Just a little emoji to let me know that you're here. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you have a lovely evening, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.